So it was an ordinary winter morning. We woke up and I was just sort of enjoying the warmth of my bed, just turning to one side, just sort of waking up, yawning, stretching, turning over to the other, and just thinking, man, this bed is nice. Finally decided, okay, it's time to get up, pulled off the covers, got out of bed, stepped into my nice warm slippers and put on my warm cozy robe and used the facilities and started to head downstairs, just ready to start my morning. I was greeted by my lovely, beautiful, wonderful dog. And just, she's all happy to see me. She's wagging her tail. She's liking what she does and giving me hugs. And just, nice, slow, easy, no big deal winter morning. Head over and get a nice cup of coffee, God's gift to mankind. And just sat down on the couch, smelling the brew and opening my Bible. Tucking in for, maybe 30, 45 minutes of coffee, Bible reading, prayer, and reflection, maybe some journaling. Just nice, right? Just nice. And after that, I closed my Bible and finished that, put things away, was just heading out onto the porch to let my dog out. Behind our house, we have a screened-in porch. And as I walked out there, that's when I saw it. Right in the middle of one of our screens, there was this long vertical slash, about 12 inches long. And then across it, right in the middle, another one, about 4 to 5 inches across. Sort of like that, And I didn't, react to it immediately. I just wanted to be like, okay, there that is. There's that. That's weird. But just pause and just let me give it some time. So I thought about it for a couple weeks, Didn't really say anything to anyone and mulled it over, talked to Scott, talked to the boys, asked, just kind of thinking, what is that? What could it be? After a couple of weeks, I came to the conclusion that somebody came to our house in the middle of the night and decided to vandalize our home. And, I wasn't upset about our property being destroyed, not destroyed, but our property being vandalized. I wasn't upset about the cost of having to fix something like that happening. But instead, what I felt was, I felt violated, attacked almost. Like someone had come in the middle of the night and stole something from me, and what they stole was my sense of security. And that's how it can feel when something is taken or something is lost. Whether it is a treasured possession, a relationship, or a life of someone that we love. It can feel like a violation, that something dear was just taken from us, with no warning, ripped out of our hands, and we are left with emptiness and shock. It's like we're one of those bobbleheads, and we're just being used as a punching bag. And on the one hand, we crumble and we weep and we fold in on ourselves. Fear creeps in and we feel like we're not just vulnerable, we're naked. And on the other, we bear down and we bury the fear and we resolve to be strong, showing outward confidence, all the while stacking up bricks, one at a time, around our heart. Either way, over time, these two repeated behaviors etch into our hearts our response to loss, creating insecurity and hardness of heart. Jesus Jesus said in John 16:20, I tell you the truth. You will weep and mourn over what is going to happen to me, but the world will rejoice. You will grieve, but your grief will suddenly turn to powerful joy. Jesus in John 16 has been explaining to the disciples what is about to happen, that he will be going to his death. He will rise from the dead and will come back to them. He has explained that he must return to God so that the Holy Spirit of truth, the advocate, will come. Jesus clearly knows that they, his disciples, will experience a grief, sorrow, and anguish that were beyond their human abilities to handle. But what's baffling to me is that Jesus says their grief will turn to joy. Jesus is referring to the grief they will feel over his death. That will happen soon. But we know that after he reappears to his disciples, he leaves again to go to the Father. However you look at it, the reality is Jesus is leaving. He's leaving the earth. And the only bodily presence of God the disciples know is Jesus. Now, the Holy Spirit will be God's presence in the world after Jesus returns to God the Father. But the disciples don't really have any concept of that. It's all new to them, right? So when Jesus speaks of his leaving and returning, sorrow turning to joy, and the Spirit coming, I'm certain that that was all very comforting for the disciples. Because first of all, their belief in Jesus isn't really rock solid in the first place. You might remember Jesus says in verse 32, but the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when you will be scattered, each one going his own way, leaving me alone. Also, as fellow humans, we know that anguish doesn't easily turn into joy. There are certain kinds of sorrow, anguish, and fear that seem to follow us wherever we go. And so the disciples, similar to us, we hear and we know in our head, but it takes much more than hearing to live with this kind of joy deep in our soul. Do you ever wonder how mountains are created? Yes, I know God created the mountains, but I mean like how it really happens. Well, God did do it, but God made a pie. So not just any kind of pie, a spherical pie ball, okay? And inside the middle of this pie ball is a solid core made of chocolate. And that solid core chocolate is very hot. It's hot as the sun, okay? And surrounding that core is a pie filling, kind of like, pecan pie, right? You know, that kind of pecan filling. It's kind of gooey, and towards the center where it's hot, it's sort of more melty. But as it comes out towards the outer parts, it's less soft and kind of more solid, but still held together, right? All right. And so on the outside, even outside of that, is the crust of this pie ball. This is the outer. And so the crust is sort of floating on this pecan pie goo. It's made out of 7 different pieces of crust, and it's sort of fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay. Now, the earth is dynamic, this pie ball. It's not just static, right? The pecan pie goo is like, it's moving, it's melting, it's convecting, it's like going down, it's coming up, and, over time, it's not like you see it moving now, but it takes time and it's dynamic. And so the crust that's like floating on top of it, it moves too. And these 7 pieces, these crust pieces, if you will, they're floating on the top, and it's not flaky pie crust, sorry. It's actually kind of more like this. So it's rock, and it's solid, and it's hard, and that crust floats over this goo. And when those pieces of crust, they meet together, they actually are compressed, and there's force, and they're pushed against each other. And in those edges, they push and they press, and there's stress and there's compression. And those rocks, as solid as they are, they bend. There's so much force and there's so much pressure that they bend. And they bend. And they break. And they fold. And they crumble. Hard rocks like this. And that's how mountains are formed. Even cooler. Sometimes the crust will come together. Oh, you thought this was just a backpack. Sometimes the crust pieces, where they come together, where they fit together, they push and they press. And one will slide under the other. And then it'll end up in that goo called magma. And it will melt. But then, because it's buoyant and it's actually lighter than the crust above it, pushes out of it and blasts out. That is a volcano, my friends. And that's how volcanoes are formed. But the really interesting thing about that is that this is how rocks can turn into other kinds of rocks. And under this extreme pressure and temperature, these rocks actually turn from one kind of rock to another kind of rock. This is just a very simple sandstone. It's pieces of sand randomly pressed together and over time becomes sandstone. But over time, and under that pressure and extreme stress, and when one piece of crust goes under the other and comes shooting out like a volcano, it cools and becomes something completely different, a piece of quartz. In the same way, if you take mud and you compress it, it becomes something called mud rock or shale, if you've heard of that. And if you keep pressing it and pushing it together, those random pieces of mud, they sort of line up and they become something called shale. And you can split shale into sheets and you can put it on your roof. And if you keep adding stress to shale and adding pressure and adding temperature, eventually it will turn into something called schist. That's not a bad word. And these little cool gemstones will develop called garnets. And in all of that, where the rocks are bending and breaking and shearing and melting, nothing is lost in that process. Nothing is destroyed or taken away. It's just reformed, formed into a new kind of rock. That's what I think about when I think about the disciples' grief over Jesus' beating, his arrest, his nailing on the cross, and when they fail him and flee. They must have felt like the crust of the earth that was getting squeezed and pressed and broken, sheared, melted, exploding. But when Jesus returns, for them to see him alive, to feel his acceptance, his forgiveness, well, it was like seeing a majestic mountain. You're seeing a volcano come out of the sea. He was not destroyed. He was not taken from them. He was alive, and he still loved them. Soon they would realize that in his leaving again to return to the Father, his bodily presence would then be in the Holy Spirit to be given to them, and that Spirit would reside in them. The Spirit was like a new form of Jesus. So when Jesus said in verse 22, "So you have sorrow now, but I will see you again," then you will rejoice, and no one can rob you of that joy. The joy is that Jesus is alive, but moreover, he will continue to be alive through them, through the Holy Spirit. In them, through the Holy Spirit. Remember in verse 13 where Jesus said, "When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth. He will not speak on his own, but will tell you what he has heard. He will tell you about the future. He will bring me glory by telling you whatever he receives from me. All that belongs to the Father is mine. That is why I said, the Spirit will tell you whatever he receives from me." The life of Jesus continues on in the Holy Spirit that resides in us. And that truth is what gives us joy. Simple, right? In theory, yes, but in practice, turning joy from sorrow isn't simple. Joy is not pretending that we're happy or being overly exuberant. It doesn't mean that we have to dance and celebrate. Joy does not come about through our hard work or our effort. We can't make it happen. But rather, as part of the fruit of the Spirit, it's something that is produced by our constant connection with God. It's like how Jesus said in John 15:4, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me." In 2 Corinthians 4:8, Paul writes, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. We have in us reminders of all of our losses, grief and despair. It can feel like parts of us have died. It's like in a very, very small way, we carry around the death of Jesus in us. We bear the scars in our insecurities, our desire of approval and pleasure. We cover the scars with pride, hardening our hearts, protecting ourselves from pain, but also preventing ourselves from being loved or loving, from trusting or being trustworthy. So we can't afford to keep on this way, because repeated grief and anguish left alone festers into fear and bitterness. We seem to easily identify with Jesus' death, but what about his life? How is it that the life of Jesus is revealed in our bodies? In Psalm 16, David writes in verse 9, "No wonder my heart is glad and I rejoice. My body rests in safety. For you will not leave my soul among the dead, or allow your Holy One to rot in the grave." David prophesies in verse 10 that as Jesus would not be left in the grave to rot, so our souls would not be left among the dead. But instead, verse 11, "You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasures of living with you forever." The life of Jesus is revealed in our bodies through the joy of his presence and the pleasure of living with him forever. This is the joy that can never be taken. So next time when you're in the middle of a conversation that's heading south, just stop. Before the next meeting, stop. In the middle of that big game, stop. Before you open Instagram, stop. Early in the morning, late at night, minute by minute, stop. In the middle of a storm, in the midst of being pressed, in the tearing of flesh, the meltdown of our minds, when we are doing the hard work of loving people in a cruel world, stop. Just stop. Stop for a few minutes. Close your eyes. Let the storm rage around you. Let the rain pelt you in the face. Hear the crushing of bone and the ripping of flesh. Feel the heat bubbling around you. Stop. Step into the dirt and uncover your light. Hold it high because your light might be the only one around. Don't be afraid because no matter what happens next, the living God is alive in you. Stop and digest that. The living God is alive in you. The living God is alive in me. The living God is alive in us. Stop and digest that. And when you feel like you've really got it, say, and living God is living in you. Living God is living in you. And me. And us. All the time. Wow. How can we not say anything but, wow. The steadfast joy of the living God living in us was there when we first believed in Jesus, and it's here in us now. Probably looks different from when it first began. But it was never taken, it was never destroyed, and it never will be. This is the joy that can never be robbed from you.